share this PowerPoint. I'm not much of a PowerPoint person, but I find that it's really useful during Zoom meetings. So you don't see me going up and down talking about notes, and there's something nice to look at just besides my face. Okay. Almost there. There we are. Can everyone see Cultivating Joy, Herbs for Building Resilience? Yes. Okay. Well, tell me, Tiffany, tell me if something happens. We should have great internet access tonight.
Yep, you're all good.
Awesome. Okay, we already talked about that. So I'm going to start by sharing a quote from Ross Gay, who is a lovely poet, that my friend and colleague Jim McDonald shared, along with sharing a link to this class, and is probably a reason why some of you are here tonight. What happens if joy is not separate from pain? What if joy and pain are fundamentally tangled up with one another? Or even more to the point, what if joy is not only entangled with pain or suffering or sorrow, but is also what emerges from how we care for each other through those things? What if joy, instead of refuge or relief from heartbreak, what is effervescence for us as we help each other carry our heartbreaks? Okay. So the reason I wanted to start with this is because times are hard for some folks. You know, many of us are feeling unsafe. Money is tight. There's just a lot of things going on in our country and in the world. And I think that between the news and how hard everyone is working and the nervousness that's happening, that our nervous systems, for not everyone, but a lot of us, are in this constant state of fight or flight. You know, and in that reality, in this constant state of fight or flight, joy can feel out of reach, or even for some folks, inappropriate. You know, I've had clients, I work with a lot of activists, and I've had clients that feel like they haven't earned joy, or it's inappropriate. There's so much work that we have to do in the world, there's no time for joy. And so I want to be clear and where I'm coming from. I like to define things and create a scaffolding, you know, in the beginning parts of class. And I think making room for lightness and joy does not mean that we stop telling the truth about our pain or grief, injustice, our fears, the hard times that we're going through. It means that we let more than one thing be true at the same time. You know, we can name what hurts, we can name what's difficult, and still let in what helps. You know, so those things that connect ourselves, you know, connect us to ourselves and to other people. So feeling joy amidst, you know, challenging times or periods of stress is not a dismissal of what you're going through. When we give our safe selves just a little space for that lightness, we can create a pocket, or like this space inside of ourselves where our bodies can unclench and remember that there are other possibilities besides fight, flight, or, you know, that freeze, that shut down. You know, that pocket might be anything from a minute of laughter with a friend to the smell of you know, a lovely cup of herbal tea, that first sip, a walk that lets your eyes rest on something green and beautiful, right? So these moments do not erase the heavy parts. They give us enough breath. They give us the space to keep facing the things that are hard and challenging. So it's a balance. So I want to talk about a couple of terms before we dive into herbs. For those of you that haven't heard this term, allostasis is the process by which the body maintains stability through change. So we're adjusting, you know, our bodies are adjusting physiology and behavior to meet anticipated demands. So most of us know homeostasis, stability through constancy. So that's our blood pH. We have a very, very, very small window that our blood's pH can be at before we're sick. Temperature, so body temperature overall, has a pretty narrow range. Not as narrow as we used to think it is, but still very narrow. It's not like 101 degrees is normal for any human being that doesn't have a health issue going on. So that model is useful. We're not saying allostasis takes over and there is no such thing as homeostasis. We're saying that there is also this layer of allostasis in our body, the stability that comes through change. So the brain predicts what the body will need based on context past experiences, and then kind of we adjust our physiology in advance. That's called predictive regulation, the body's ability to anticipate future needs and kind of adjust us over time. So this predictive regulation, it shows up everywhere. So it shows up within our heart rate, a blood pressure rising before a hard effort. So digestion, if you're anxious and you're worried, and you're in fight or flight mode, your digestion slows. You can have digestive issues. Your insulin rises before a meal. If you eat your meals every day, they have looked at studies that show that even in the anticipation of that food, if your body is used to eating food at 2 p.m. every day, you get an insulin spike before you start eating. So the goal is efficiency. And the reason why understanding allostasis is important in terms of how important it is to feel joy in our lives is when life repeatedly cues threats. So if life repeatedly teaches us for whatever reason, there's tons of reasons, right? That we need to be stressed out, that we're not safe, that we're overloaded, that there are threats to our bodies and our minds, our threshold shifts toward vigilance. So that's stress chemistry, cortisol. We have, all of the cascade of stress hormones. It starts to become the default. And that happens in our autonomic nervous system, our endocrine system, our immune system. So our entire body is being co-opted to maintain that state because it's energy efficient. Our body says, the world says, our life says, this is where we need to be. And the brain says, okay, I've got you. And so we think about this idea of allostatic load. So the wear and tear on the body that builds up when the stress response is activated for too long or for too often. And so this is not our body failing, right? This is our body doing its best to keep us alive and to keep us safe with the information that it has. So starting from that place creates a foundation for change. So knowing that although having a high allostatic load, high stress, chronic stress, traumas, things like that, over the long term, they're creating this wear and tear on the body. That doesn't mean that our bodies are against us. Right? It actually is the opposite. They're trying to take, our brain is trying to take care of us. And so to build resilience, and this is where, herbs and relationships with herbs come in, we need to give that system new predictions to work with. So we want to create frequent, believable experiences of not being threatened, of not being anxious, of not being stressed out. So those moments of joy and pleasure, connection, deep rest, restorative sleep, restorative activities, the things that we find to have sensory pleasure, having those small, frequent experiences, even if it's 10 seconds, even if it's 30 seconds a day, those experiences nudge our system back into balance and towards recovery over time. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. And so because stress is sustained by, multiple body systems, our way to build resilience through that stress and through those difficult times is multi-pronged. So we need more than one thing. We don't just want to take an herb. We want to take an herb in multiple forms. We want to make connections. We want to do the best we can to protect our sleep. But when we can, not all of us can sleep as much as we need to all the time. That's just not how life works. But we can nurture our sleep environment and do the best we can with what we have. So that's pretty cool. So what is resilience? A few of these, I'm going to give you a basic definition, then I'd love some sharing to go on. If you feel comfortable, you can speak it or share it into the chat. So at the most basic level, resilience is the capacity to adapt and recover in the face of stress. So challenges, change, it can be positive or negative stressors, right? There are things that we love, a marathon runner, an Olympic athlete, they might love the stress, but it's also it doesn't mean that it isn't stress. There's a difference between, eustress, positive stress, and stress that we feel as negative, but it all is a part of, the process that we need to adapt to. In clinical psychology, resilience is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to adversity, trauma, threats, or significant stressors through a mixture of mental, emotional, or behavioral flexibility. So for me, the way that I look at resilience is adaptive flexibility in dealing with life stressors. But also not just the capacity to adapt and recover, the capacity to stay engaged in life and the ways in which we desire to be while dealing with our stressors. That doesn't mean I'm going to do every fun thing that comes along, but it means that I can be stressed and I can go with the flow and still stay engaged in my life. The ability to find joy in my daily life as I move through stressful and non-stressful situations. And the more resilient we are, the better able to deal with stress, and the more likely we are to be, mentally healthier, to be able to adapt and manage mental health issues. And noting we're not all coming from the same place in terms of resilience, and so we have to create a unique set of resiliency building practices. Why this is such a fun thing to talk about, because no matter where we're at, there is something that we can build in to help. Joy. So this is why we're all here. We're here to talk about joy. Joy is a brief state of positive affect. So this is kind of what we're talking about joy clinically. A brief state of positive affect when your body and mind kind of register something as good or meaningful, something that feels safe. It widens our attention. It makes us, it makes connection easier, whether that's to yourself, to others, to animals, to plants. It allows you to look outside of that narrow stress vision and open your lens, and it also helps the system recover after stress. For me, joy lightens and brightens the moments in my day. So it makes stress not feel so heavy. It doesn't take it away. It makes it easier to deal with. For me, it's often sensory. Although, there are moments of mental joy related to the work that I do. I would love, as I'm talking, if folks want to also share the things that bring them joy and kind of what joy looks like to them. So we're here to talk about joy, and how does joy promote resilience? So I just briefly talked about how joy can widen our lens. So for me, one of the most important cornerstones for resiliency building is creating, in my clients and within myself and in my community, my students and friends and colleagues, is to create a greater capacity for joy, to create a greater capacity for those moments of lightness. So we're occupied with the frenzy of life, with all of the things that I've already talked about, without giving ourselves that space through rest and restoration and connection, the things we've talked about. Our brains will continue to assume that we want or need to be in this kind of depleting, stress-seeped situation. And we don't want to continue that automation. We want to teach our bodies that we're going to move back and forth. We can move into stress and feel those deep feelings, feel the grief, feel the fear, feel the whatever feelings that we need to feel. And then we can move into joy, and it can be a fluid process. The goal is to teach our bodies that as much as possible. So positive emotions, we're talking about quick resets. Positive emotions broaden that attention and can help you build long-term resources over time. They also speed physiological recovery from stress and help with that connection. And they relate prospectively to better health and lower mortality. So having regular moments of joy, positive affect, positive emotions. And additionally, sleep and positive emotions reinforce each other. So if you've had more moments of joy within your day, it's going to be easier to sleep. And if you sleep deeply, it will be easier the next day to have positive emotions. And so you can probably see how some of us get caught in that hamster wheel because we had 4 hours of sleep because we couldn't do anymore. We have work, we have kids. And then that makes us grumpy and narrow and less able to feel joy, which makes it harder to sleep. And we have this, we get into this loop. Herbs are really amazing touch points for breaking that kind of stress, grumpiness, sleep loop. So there's something called the broaden and build theory, and I kind of mentioned it, but so it's in the moment. Joy widens that lens, so we notice more options and more resources in the moment, and then over time, teaching our bodies to continue to do that, and that builds coping skills. So one of the ways that psychologists look at this is, you can try this yourself. We're not really set up to do it all together, but it's something that's really interesting. So you can make a cup of hot tea when you're having a stressful day. Don't drink the hot tea, don't smell it. Maybe it's, maybe your tea water is, warming up. So you haven't had the tea yet. You're not getting that lovely experience of drinking your cup of herbal tea. And then you decide to pick as many of a certain type of object as you can in your field. So let's say in this classroom that I'm in, there's a lot of green. So I'm like, you have 10 seconds to pick out as many green things as you can. And then the goal is to drink the tea, get some relaxation, and in 10 seconds, see how many more things that are whatever you pick, the green things, the red objects. And the key takeaway is that joy doesn't erase those stress, but it lets you see more than just stress. So across the board, when someone engages in something that is pleasurable to them, they over and over and over again were able to see more of their surroundings, more of the specific type of things in their surroundings. It's easier for us to do things like text a friend when we need support, step outside, drink that tea you already made, ask for a hug. We have the physiological shifts. We take something like lavender or blue vervain. So one of these like really lovely, anti-anxiety, relaxing herbs, our shoulders drop, our breath lengthens, our eye softens, our heart rate steadies. And through that, we get the cognitive flexibility. We get an increased motivation to do more things. Maybe we'll make tea tomorrow. Maybe I'll make a quart of tea that I can do tonight that I can drink throughout the day tomorrow. And so we're having this increased motivation, the social reach. We're more likely to reach out and to our communities, whether it's volunteering, calling your mom, taking a walk with your neighbor. And we're more likely to make meaning and to persist within our meaning making, because joy loosens rigid thinking. It's easier to let go of rumination. It's easier to shift gears. All right. So how do we connect with plants? So we're going to be talking a lot about specific plants. I'm gonna go into detail talking about these specific plants. But I feel like that it's not just about taking the herb, right? So we can talk for a minute about the different ways that we can connect with these plants before we even get into the specifics of the individual words. There are so many entry points into accessing herbs. Sometimes it's as simple as making a cup of tea and noticing how it feels, to hold that warm mug, to breathe the steam, to take that first sip. If you're a tea drinker, I'm a tea drinker. I drink green tea in the morning, and it is the best, sometimes the best part of my day. Not always, but it's an amazing moment of joy. I know that in Japanese culture, there is a word that I don't know of for the first sip of tea when it's at the exact right temperature. I wish I had that translation. I didn't remember it until now. So little acts of joy, making tea, looking at, Linden is on this picture. So we're thinking about, even when we're making tea, we're looking at the textures of the herbs. We can smell them, we can touch them, we can see how they change and wonder what color. So I wonder what color that linden tea will be based on the colors that we see. Is it going to pull out that yellow or that orange, or is it going to be a different color? We can garden. We can do sensory walks. I'm going to talk about sensory walks. That's going to come up over and over with different types of herbs. But in resilience theory and, in dealing with folks in crisis even, so you might see like a paramedic doing that after someone has an accident, they're going to ask folks to notice things in their surrounding. What are you smelling right now? Describe that tree. And so doing a sensory walk, that's really specific, I think, to plants. It can be anything really, but since we're herbalists, and we're here to talk about plants, doing sensory walks and noticing the smells and the textures of plants, medicinal or not, is a really amazing way to connect. We can do pendulation with herbs, and not the witchy pendulation, right? We can take an herb into our bodies, focus on something outside of ourselves that is nice and beautiful, that feels good, that feels safe. And then we can kind of pendulate back into our bodies and do a body scan. How am I feeling? Am I feeling good in here? Am I feeling anxious? Is my chest tight? Are my hips tight? You just kind of do a scan. If that starts to feel uncomfortable, then you can kind of pendulate out and go back to the beautiful tree. Or, if I'm doing this in a class and, we're in a room, I think about my favorite pillow because it's just the most amazing thing in the entire world. Besides plants. But you can think about whatever you want and go back and forth within those states. And that is practicing, that's having your body practice go between, the state of stress and going between one state and another, which is a really amazing way to build resilience. And it can be with any herb. It works really well with nervine herbs. And we're going to talk about those kind of calming herbs for calm, for rest, for restoration, herbs that are really specific to building joy. But you can pendulate with any herbs. And your classroom will have a document that explains in a little more detail how to do that for those of you that would like to try it. Let's see, what else? Yes, we said gardening, making medicines, and it doesn't always have to be, not all of us are working with clients. Some of us are making things for gifts. Some of us are making things for farmers markets. We have a lot of people in class tonight. I'm sure you're coming from all different, really interesting walks of life. I wish I had time to hear what everyone does. I love hearing about that. All of the ways in which we act as herbalists in the world. But making medicines can be anything from making, clinically concentrated extracts for your clients to going to a potluck and bringing some really lovely herb syrup with the things you collected on your walk or that you have in your medicine cabinet. Maybe you're just, maybe you have rose petals and clove and you make a rose and clove syrup and bring some fizzy water to the potluck. And everyone's going to be getting that warming herbs and that like gentle heart softening rose together. Right? So making medicine isn't just about it being like, there's a lot things that bring joy are also medicine, basically. What else? What are you folks? Are there ways that you like to connect with plants? I know I only listed a handful. And this is not to say that when I'm not incredibly stressed out for my 10-hour days and I'm exhausted, that I don't just down a teaspoon, half a teaspoon of blue vervain and call it good. And that's also a way to, help our bodies. But that's just one way to connect. We have all of these really cool other ways to connect. So yeah, the point is it's not only about taking herbs, it's about how we take them and the relationships that we develop with them along the way. And those are the relationships we have with the plants we know well, build resilience and connection. A lot of folks, I tell a lot of folks, like clients or people that aren't necessarily in a program, they're more focused on self-study. Pick an herb a week or an herb a month. Taste it in all of its forms. Really get to know it. Journal about it. There'll be a link or there'll be a document in your classroom that's about kind of a guide to doing a tea tasting with yourself. So ways to think, like questions to think about while you're tasting and like a little portions to be able to like walk and work. Oh yeah, plant dream work. Foraging, absolutely. For those of us that know how to, safely gather plants, that could be a really great way. Ooh, making elderberry syrup to give to friends. So those gifts, I think that doing things, being interconnected with our community, using herbs to like making a lovely herbal gift is an excellent way to build a relationship with plants, whether or not you're taking those in your body. All right, now let's talk about some herbs. Now that I've talked for a half an hour about not herbs, let's get to it. If it's not frozen. All right, so I want to talk about some exhilarant herbs. So exhilarant herbs in Unani Tib medicine, an exhilarant remedy, are those that incline the heart toward joy. And I think that, so this is a type of herb that it's not necessarily an antidepressant, not in the modern sense. They act partially on the physical heart and what they call the vital spirit. as well as that emotional essence. So this rests on like a more classical view. So in Unami Tib medicine, melancholy had a home in the heart. Um, and so the heart was more than just a pump for blood, right? It was the seat of this vital spirit, the governor of emotions, motivation, and the will to live. So we carried the will to live within the organ that Unami Tib practitioners called the heart. So that statue is Ibn Sina. He was the most famous uh, Unami Tib doctor, and he wrote the Canon of Medicine. And he says, exhilarants work by restoring the heart's temperament. They gently warm, they moisten, they improve the circulation of vital spirits through their subtle pathways and clear the blockages that keep joy from reaching awareness. So this is physical and emotional blockages. And I just love that. It's clearing the blockages that keep joy from reaching our awareness. So it's that sensory gating. It's what we talked about earlier with the fight or flight. We're stuck in stress. We're stuck in that narrow view, and we can use herbs to widen that view so that the joy that's all around us in small moments gets to our conscious awareness. So they had a couple of different categories within this exhilarant herb. So they had just cardiac tonics, so strengthen the physical organ, the pump that we have. There are those brain exhilarants, so those ones that brighten cognition. True exhilarant herbs lift the emotional spirit, so they're brightening cognition, lifting the emotional spirit, walls apart, gently and tonically supporting cardiac function. And in practice, the way that we use these herbs in modern herbal medicine is to lighten the heart, renew courage, to make space for joy, while kind of still respecting the heart, the emotional heart. We just say emotional heart or physical heart now, right? Most of us when we're talking about in the Western herbal tradition, they're all of these herbs. The emotional heart is about the center of vitality and the center of emotion and feeling. And so all of the exhilarant herbs are aromatic and generally have an upward moving energy. And so some of them are classified in Unami Tib medicine as exhilarant. And we'll talk about the three most common ones. But if we think about, and maybe you can share as we're talking through the other herbs, some herbs that would fit the bill. So herbs that are aromatic, they're maybe a little bit warming or neutral. They have an upward moving energy. And so this is a lovely way to explore familiar herbs with a new lens. Looking at herbs, aromatic herbs with an upward moving energy, as herbs that can help clear those blockages to bring joy and to help joy reach, our conscious awareness. All right. So the three classic exhilarants are saffron, rose, and lemon balm. And these herbs are often mixed with warming aromatics. So, they didn't technically have a primary and a secondary, but we're thinking about herbs like cardamom and cinnamon and clove also as exhilarants, but they weren't often in solution alone, right? They're usually going to be mixed with one of these more classic exhilarants. What are some other herbs that could kind of fit that bill? Peek at the chat.
Ginger. Cinnamon. Oh, she said cinnamon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that Tulsi, absolutely. Definitely, we have rose. Cinnamon was absolutely one of the herbs that they used in exhilarant formulas. Yeah, I think lemon verbena could. It has a little bit less of that nervine quality, but it definitely has that upward motion. Bergamot, ooh, lavender, absolutely. I think ginger I would think is an exhilarant in the sense that it would bring that heat and warmth to the formulas. Absolutely. So saffron's one of my favorite herbs. There's so many different ways to prepare it. Saffron is expensive to purchase, so it's an expensive investment, but you don't need very much. And your notes We'll explain how to make a tincture and get the most out of it. Also knowing that the dosage of tincture is very small, right? So we're doing, anywhere from 10 to 20 drops. We're not even doing an entire dropper, generally, of saffron. It can be taken, so it can be taken as a tincture. You can make rice with saffron. You can make grains with saffron. I love, for folks that imbibe alcohol, it's really nice. So 2 threads is kind of the standard dose. So you could just make a cup of tea with those 2 threads. It pulls the aromatics very quickly. So it's really beautiful if you have a clear cup to pour hot water over 2 saffron threads and to watch the color steep out and down into the bottom. Very beautiful. And for those of you that imbibe, we can think about a crisp white wine. And if you can do it per however much you want to drink. So let's say you want the classic serving, which is around 4 ounces. Then you just do the math, 2 saffron threads per 4-ounce serving. And so a serving is that. If you want a serving to be smaller, 2 ounces, then you're going to kind of double that. And you can scale scale it up that way. You can put things into baked goods. Also, saffron capsules you don't get as many of the aromatics, of course, because it's closed up, but they're still pretty inexpensive and effective. Saffron was the bringer of warmth and clarity, like sunlight breaking through the clouds. And so it helps to lift the fog of heaviness. Saffron can restore a sense of brightness. And open that heart to the warmth and like the sunny parts of our lives, the sunny side of joy and connection. And so in traditional writing, saffron was treasured for its ability to incline the spirit towards joy. And our modern uses really echo that same gift, right? So supporting emotional balance, easing anxiety and tension while helping us with that remember pleasure when it feels far away. Clinically, saffron has shown a strong, extremely strong benefit for depression. Also anxiety. It works really well for anxiety, but it's especially really great for depression and really great for that first bout with depression. And saffron at the right dosage there has in a handful of studies match the effects of common antidepressants while being gentler on the system with less side effects. And it's especially helpful when we have low mood that shows up as mental fog or emotional flatness. So we call that anhedonia, loss of interest in what once felt good. So not just not making space for joy, but there is no joy. All we're feeling is flatness. Strong emotions on either end of the spectrum are kind of gone. Yeah, so that is kind of what I have to say about saffron. So saffron, you get some effect right away, but you're taking it longer term, or at least taking it for a week or so. I don't know, in terms of studies, what the most effective dose was for that length of time. And it might be, Cicely, it might be about dosage, and it might be, so it might be about dosage, and it might be just not the right herb for him if he didn't notice a difference. So the notes, Wendy, will be available out. Thanks, Tiffany. After class. All right, so let's talk about rose. Rose might be the most, we'll say maybe worldwide, I think might be the most classic herb that, all of us know. Rose has been, rose is a classic in herbal medicine. It was one of the most classic exhilarants. It's been classic in perfume and aromatherapy, since the beginning, Rose is cooling. So it isn't, oftentimes rose, you're seeing rose paired with some of those warming herbs. I really love rose and saffron together, yes, rose and saffron. I really love rose with a little bit of cardamom. So that is the one that is really nice to me. Cinnamon is really good, along with maybe something sour to kind of balance that flavor. Like hibiscus, something like that. Cinnamon, hibiscus, rose. So yeah, it has a long history of use in aromatherapy, excuse me, in herbalism. We have revered our roses for centuries for their ability to kind of balance the heart, the mind, and the emotions, to gently and softly alleviate anxiety. So rose might not stop a panic attack, but rose is really lovely for that really low grade anxiety that, your clients, or maybe I see this in clients, but also like if you like within your own body, that it's so mild and so persistent and permeating that it almost isn't defined as, you don't even think you're anxious until you talk to somebody else and find out like, oh, that's not normal. Like jumping when like a butterfly, floats by the side of your head is not that's not normal. That might be anxiety, or something like, grinding your teeth or stressful dreams, things that just become so normal that we're like, I don't know, that's just the way that I am. So rose is really great for that. Roses very uplifting. It strengthens both the physical and the energetic heart. So we're thinking about easing sorrow, grief, and heartache. It inclines us towards joy, but not in that overwhelming, warming, hot, sunny burst, but in a steady, gentle way that reminds us of the beauty and the safety even during those difficult times. Rose can also gently calm and nourish our nervous system and soothe emotional distress. So I love it as a tea. I don't use it as often as a tincture, although I will add it in formulas. I mostly put rose petals as a tea, or use it through its fragrance, right? So I love rose hydrosol. I like to keep one in the refrigerator, and just spray it on my face and neck. Spray it around my head and kind of get a head change. So you get that shock from the coolness. And as it heats up on your skin, you start to smell those aromatics. And it's just a really lovely, like temperature shift. It's like another way to kind of shock our bodies, or suggest our bodies to let go of tension, to kind of soften those edges and find that resilience that comes from a more open and protected heart.
Mel, do we like rose as petals mostly, or do we also use hips?
So we use rose hips. I would say for the like exhilarant qualities, we're going to be using the petals or the like little buds. So absolutely using rose hips. Rose hips are less aromatic and they're more like a lovely source of vitamin C and minerals. But I've also had quite a few whole rose elixirs that felt very uplifting. So I say if it feels good to put it in your blend, to do that. Because that kind of the floral mixed with the sour is a really nice flavor. Lemon balm. So lemon balm's funny. So it's aromatic, but it's mostly cooling. It's one of the few kind of, aromatic mint family plants that are actually a little more on the cooling side. It's still considered an exhilarant because it has an upward motion and because of those aromatics. So it's likely that, I'm extrapolating, but it's likely that it was considered warming within the exhilarant category because of the aromatics and because of that upward moving nature. But it really is kind of energetically net cooling within like the Western herbal mammalia. So lemon balm, I love lemon balm. I think it's fantastic. I really love lemon balm because it is uplifting but relaxing. Right. So saffron, uplifting, wonderful, bringing that sun in. It's not really going to make you sleepy, right? It's not going to be sedating. But the amazing thing about lemon balm is that it has that relaxation. It's really amazing for the folks that can't stop going. So it's not that they can't feel joy. Maybe they have plenty of space, plenty of capacity for joy, but no time for joy. So it helps to ease sadness. It takes the edge off of sadness and depression. It can be a really gentle adjunct for mania. Not, a treatment in and of itself, of course, part of a comprehensive program because that's a serious health issue. In higher doses, the studies have shown that it helps with sleep. And if you've looked at any of the herbal supplements that are coming out for sleep, the more modern ones or the practitioner facing ones that have a little bit stronger herbs, you're going to see lemon balm in it a lot. because they're seeing these really lovely benefits to enhancing sleep. And I think it's because we think it's for that person who can't stop going. So even if it's not the herb that's knocking you out, it's not valerian, right? It's, it's not like a heavy dose, like a teaspoon of kava. It's not just going to knock you on your bum, but it can create a gap in the going so that your body's like, oh yeah, I'm tired. And then you can rest. It's that softness. It can aid in memory and concentration, especially if it is memory and concentration issues because of stress and burnout, because it can help with that like gentle kind of calming, tension releasing aspect. And on top of it, it's a really lovely carminative. So it's great for like gastric heat, gut cramping, like excess gas. It is fantastically easy to grow, so much so, as probably some of you know, that it will take over a garden, unless you're like, living in the Southwest or in a desert part, like deserty part of the world. Then it generally will take over. And this is great in anything from a tea to a tincture. I don't really like glycerites very much, so herbs made in glycerin. Lemon balm is one of the few. And so we make that in like the sealed simmer method. So it's basically like your canning, your water bath canning. And so that preserves the aromatics. And then that pure lemon balm glycerate, nothing else, is amazing in fizzy water. And people love it. Bring it to a party. So, sprinkles, put a little bit of, lemon balm glycerite and a couple drops of bitters into some fizzy water with maybe a lemon or some rose petals. People love it. And it's a really great way to kind of bring an uplifting mood to your evening. I really love the head change in the evening from work to not work. And oftentimes without a head shift, I just keep working. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. I'm sure that some of you can. But I love these, but I also am not going to imbibe alcohol every day because it doesn't feel nice in my body. So I use a ton of these exhilarant herbs to make little mocktails. So like something in like a fizzy water or juice that I can use that will give you that head shift, right? To be able to do the relaxation and the restoration. And we'll definitely talk about some more herbs that I like specifically for rest and restoration. But these are the three most classic exhilarants. Ooh, lemon balm honey. I've never made that. And I would like to try to do that. Maybe I will. We have a ton in the garden. It's sad in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, so it doesn't grow as well. I mean, that makes sense. Oh, for SADS, you're using lemon balm for seasonal affective disorder. Absolutely. I lived in Eugene for 8 years, and I ultimately feel like it was the winters that got me that got me to go back to where I'm living now. Let's see. So I think energetically throwing some thorns into a rose tincture. I've never personally made just a thorn because I like the softness with the prickliness, but I think that either way, if you're tincturing the rose thorns for protection, it would be an energetic dose. So if it's just the thorns, just a few drops to kind of it's more of that like energetic kind of bringing mental awareness to the need for protection. I think the other option is to make a rose preparation and throw a few thorns in and then dose it normally. And then you can have kind of that softness and that kind of gentle heart protection along with the pricklies. And that's kind of the way I prefer to do it. But absolutely, you can make a tincture of just the thorns. The dosage it's going to be very astringent and it's not going to have a lot of it's not going to have the aromatics in it. But yeah, I think energetically it could still work. So let's talk a little bit about connection before I jump into herbs of connection. And so we can make connections with plants, but they can also help us connect with others and make the experiences more full of joy. I don't know if anyone can tell that I'm a sanguine person. I'm a very, very social person, so I talk a lot about connection. But it isn't just connection with other people. So this can be with ourselves. This can be with plants, with the natural world in general, with our animals. I have 3 dogs, and laying with all three of them, they're not allowed in the bed often, but laying with all three of them cuddling up around me when I'm really stressed out is just as good as a few droppers of skull cap. And so it's an important part of resilience and the cultivation of joy is connection with other folks. And a lot of us, when we're stressed out, we pull away from our connections, whether that's connecting with the joy in ourselves, our families, our friends, our partners and loves, our animals. And so this is the cultivation of joy with others, and that can be everything from sex to cuddling with our dogs to brushing our aromatic plants while gardening. I do that a lot. I'll be like seeing clients and then there's a garden in the back of the herb shop and I'll go out and I'll just be like, hey, lavender, right? And you just like, you're not pulling them, I'm not pulling the herbs, but I'm brushing, you're brushing plants and those aromatics come out and then just like smelling your hands and just kind of getting a head change that way. Those sensory walks, again, I told you I would bring up over and over again, all ways to connect. So herbs can help bring us into the present moment. So they can help us have that space in the moment, or at least assess in the moment if we have the space. They bring us into our bodies and can make space for connection. And not everyone feels safe going deeply into their body. And so the folks that have had things happen to them that make that harder, that doesn't mean that they can't also connect with themselves. I think that the pendulation exercise that I talked about in the beginning is a really lovely way for folks that feel a little unsafe in their bodies to use herbs and to kind of practice going in and out of their body and going to a safe place. We can also connect with herbs on a deeper level through self-study and through those sensory tea tastings. And I won't go into that again, we already talked about it, but you will have a worksheet to kind of do that if you'd like. So connection is what keeps us okay when the world isn't, when stress hits and we're pulling back. We have long days, making time for people and our pets and for ourselves can feel impossible. But that withdrawal drains resilience over time. Our systems regulate better with other nervous systems nearby. Safe, like regular safe contact with something alive lowers our stress hormones. It widens our lenses. It makes those coping options easier. Just everything we talked about with joy in general. So connection isn't an extra thing. It's kind of the fuel. It's a fuel to help us with resilience, and we can make it small and regular. So it's just as good to take 5 minutes of your day to walk outside and take an herbal formula, or even 1 minute, than it is to only do 1 or 2 long things a month. I generally tell my clients 2 things. One, I have them make a joy list, right? So things like that integrates connection, right? So what is one thing, like list, 10 things that take 5 minutes or under that bring you joy and make you feel connected. List 10 things that, take 30 minutes. And then do, 10 things that take an hour or more. And I say, once a day, do something 5 minutes and under. Once a week, do something around 30 minutes. And then try once a month to do something that takes an hour or longer, that connects you with someone else, with plants, with your animals. We can also do things like go on errands with our friends, like normalizing, bring some bring some of that lemon balm honey in an herbal preparation. Bring your favorite herbal preparation and like normalize doing things like errands, co-cleaning houses, sharing a 10-minute call while you take a walk. So getting really creative, basically, with the ways that you can connect, especially if time is a resource that you don't have a lot of, because we all have a different set of resources. And time is, one of the, we're living in a capitalist culture and a capitalist economy. So time, because time allows us to make, the money, the thing that we need to buy things and pay our bills and eat food. Time is one of the biggest resources for most of us. I always say, be the bringer of herbs. Like every single one of us, I don't know how many people are here. I know it's probably around 50. Each one of us can be the bringer of herbs. We can do something simple. We can carry it around in our cars or on our bikes, and be the bringer of herbs. And everyone's going to have a smile because, after they taste your lovely herbal preparation, it's going to bring them just as much joy as it did for you to make it. So there's a ton of herbs that, I'm putting, connection in quotes, because basically what we need to do to be able to connect is to feel calm and reasonably safe and to be able to take some space from our stress. And there are a ton of herbs. There are a ton of herbs that can do that for us, right? So what I did is I picked herbs that are known for different types of connection, with ourselves, with other people. And so I picked my 4 favorite herbs for connection, which does not mean that these are all of the herbs for connection. And honestly, any one of the herbs that we've talked about so far, and every single herb that we talk about after, if you're using it to share with others, or it's the herb that makes you feel calm and relaxed and happy and fuzzy and ready to talk to people or snuggle or have sex or do, whatever it is that you want to be doing with the people that you are spending your time around, then that's your herb of connection. So I'm not going to talk about these in order because my notes aren't in order. And so I'm going to start with Aurelia berry. So Aurelia berry is the berry of Aurelia racemosa. On the West Coast, it's Aurelia californica is the most common. And sometimes folks call that the Aurelia racemosa spikenard. And so both the racemosa that's in general commerce and the californica, the berries are, very different than the root. So we're using Aurelia root, we're using spikenard root as a warming aromatic root with lung push is what I say. Like it's warming, but not super duper hot. It helps. It like slightly can help to activate the immune system. I think through like the warming aromatics, it can help expectorate coughs. Generally those like boggy, thick coughs where it's hard to get things up. Not so much the dry coughs, but the berries, completely different action. And those of you that are in the Pacific Northwest might know this herb. Maybe not everybody, knows this herb. I can't source it all the time, but I will have, the school apothecary will have some tincture. I'm getting a friend from Oregon to harvest a couple pounds of the berries. But it is out there. You can get it. There are people making it. Aurelia is a member of the ginseng family. So this herb is this berry, Aurelia berry, is a moistening, semi-stimulating. So not even as stimulating as Schizandra, not as stimulating as ginseng. It's an adaptogen-like herb. I think it's an adaptogen. Paul Bergner also, thought it was an adaptogen. There haven't been studies. It isn't an herb of commerce, right? And so we don't know if it has that HPA axis modulating situation that the few of the true adaptogens have. But this is not stimulating in the same way that like Eleuthero or rhodiola is. So this is really gentle. It's really a lot more gentle. And it is less of the aromatics. It's more sweet and sour, so it has more of like a classic berry taste. It's really lovely for seasonal depression. So that's sad. Maybe mixing your lemon balm with some Aurelia berry. I forget who mentioned that, but I know someone was talking about, someone mentioned being in the Pacific Northwest and using that herb. And it pairs really well with St. John's wort for seasonal affective disorder as well. So you can think about this for, hormonal mood swings, postpartum depression. It can be really helpful in because it's not super stimulating. It's helpful for depletion and fatigue in younger folks who don't need ginseng yet. So we don't need to give everybody ginseng. I only give ginseng to folks that are older, that are like elder age. Or someone in like very special circumstances. But Aurelia berry is pretty prevalent and not endangered. And if it's harvested, you're not taking every single berry on every plant, right? We're using that, taking 1/3 or less, of a plant at a time. It is completely, it's sustainable. We call it the dance berry. So I learned that my first herb teacher was Howie Brownstein, and I don't remember where he learned it. Maybe Michael Moore, but he called it the dance berry. And it is a lovely addition to formulas for social anxiety. It can be used for introverts who either need to or want to like take some time to be social, but just like can't quite get there. Like people that actually want it and they really enjoy it, but they just can't quite get there. It seems to make folks chatty, energized, and kind of ready to move their bodies in the ways that feels good without being stimulating. You don't feel buzzy. You don't feel like you haven't had coffee, nothing like that. So it's this feel good in our bodies experience that is often what helps folks connect with themselves, with others, and with their partners. It's great for dance parties, before yoga, and any form of movement, group movement especially. It pairs really well with kava and damiana for the ultimate, like I call it the party cordial. And you have a recipe, it's on the next page. I call it Life of the Party formula. So really, really, really wonderful herb of connection. Who is absolutely best friends with kava, kava kata. So kava was used in Polynesian religious ceremonies to reduce anxiety. It's also used to reduce anxiety and relax muscles. It is a social plant. And it seems to offer the most benefits to those using it socially. Although I will say you take enough kava and it is going to help with sleep as well. So higher doses of kava are very sedating, but low to mid doses are kind of that mix of relaxing and stimulating. So it's really helpful when taken with a partner to bring intentional connection before sex or before intimacy. It can be used in baths as long as you don't mind a slight tingle. Topically as a massage oil for sore muscles and just for relaxation. It can also be taken internally. And so kava, yeah, it's really great for, also really great for social anxiety. So we use it a lot for folks that, public speaking. Like years and years ago when I first started teaching, I was really nervous and I would take kava and it just helped. It brought out that extrovert in me. It brought out that person that was like, oh, these are my people. And we're just sitting here talking about herbs and it's really amazing. And so kava, yeah, really, really amazing for connection. It can be really helpful to take if you have to have hard conversations, right? And so, kava was used in communication historically. And I think so that can be another way, a different type of connection, but very useful for that as well. I'm gonna stop and take a peek. So Cicely, I don't really know that there is I'll have to think about and get back to you. I also could send you some. I think we still have your address, or you can give us your new address. When I make some Aurelia berry tincture for you to play with. But let me kind of think about it. It's you can do it. The hard part is finding the herbs. The piece of Aurelia berry that's really hard to use other herbs to support is this like feel good in your body without realizing you're all of a sudden feeling good in your body. And I don't necessarily offhand have an herb, but let me think about some combinations. And if I think about it by the end of class, I'll share with everyone. And if not, I'll put it in the notes. We can also get Thomas's brain on it. He has a darn near photographic memory, so he'd be able to, help with that. Damiana. So Damiana, mildly warming, aromatic, uplifting, bitter, tonic nervine. So the Damiana is one of the herbs, whether you're taking it in a tea or a tincture, that is going to help your body with resiliency building over time. So your capacity to handle stress over time, so it's stronger than something like milky oats or skullcap, but it still has a tonic action. It can release physical tension. It brings blood flow to the abdomen and the pelvis, and it seems to make folks really cuddly. Damiana is a classic aphrodisiac, but I think that's really not a good idea to pigeonhole Damiana as an aphrodisiac, because I think it's so much more than that. I think it's an herb of connection. Because it's not like it's going to make someone want to, all of a sudden just, go wild. It really is going to work specifically with people that you want to connect with. So it's indicated for folks that are frayed, but also a little depressed. I mean, it's also really specific for folks that lose their sex drive or they lose their desire to connect with others when they're really stressed out. And for, that sensory tactile connection is just like, there's no interest in sensory or tactile connection with yourself or with those around you when you're stressed out. Then like Damiana is your herb. Drink it as a tea, drink it as a tincture, make it into, this lovely formula that I'll share in a minute. But that's kind of the most specific indication. All right, epimedium. So epimedium is an herb that in general commerce is called horny goatweed. I won't call it that. And I think there are 51 of us here. And if every one of us just decides to call it by its Latin name, epimedium, instead of horny goatweed, it will maybe not be pigeonholed as an aphrodisiac. So epimedium, also a lot like Damiana, it's warming, relaxing. It does have that vasodilating properties. It's also kind of, more of a tonic. And it is best known for its role as an aphrodisiac, but it's so much more complex. So I help this it has vasodilating properties. It can also help folks with high blood pressure. It really can help folks whose blood pressure spikes when they're stressed out, right? So it's relaxing, bringing circulation to the extremities. It's really good for folks with reproductive fatigue or like folks that have had, multiple kiddos in a short period of time or just feel like especially exhausted from, having a kiddo. Because of that warming properties, it's able to stimulate kind of sluggish tissues and improve blood flow. It is, it does that everywhere at the extremities. That includes your, the genital and the lower abdominal region. So we don't think about it, but our genitals are in the periphery of our body. Right. So if we're thinking of the periphery as the edge, if you're, I wish I had a diagram, I should have put a diagram in here, but basically like the edges of the drawing, if you're drawing a flat human with like their arms and legs spread out, the genitals are on the periphery of the body, just like your hands are, or, the edges of your hands and your feet are. And so it's improving that blood flow. My favorite herb to do a tea tasting. So at the school, and oftentimes we'll do blind tea tastings, right? Which means we don't tell folks the herb. We just make sure that no one's on medications that aren't safe with the herb. And then we give a stronger amount of an herb to folks, and then they're tasting it. And when I do epimedium, it's my most favorite because you physically see them relax. Like you can see the muscles move down, like a downward sort of motion. And people, you hear people sighing, and then they're like looking sideways and they're smiling at other folks. And then all of a sudden it hits people and everyone's talking and, talking and connecting. And it was through watching, I've always used it as a nervine. I learned that from a good friend and colleague, Lindsay Feldposh, who kind of is the herbalist in the United States that I know that kind of brought that sort of epimedium in that way. And as soon as she showed me, I was hooked. And it is able to get it. Like I said, horny goatweed is, if you're buying it from like Mountain Rose Herbs or Star West or one of those, it's a really nice tasting tea. And the dosages will be in your handout. One more thing. So epimedium in some studies does contain a compound called icarin, which has been studied for its ability to inhibit an enzyme that is responsible that you need for erections. And so although it's not going to work exactly the same as Viagra, it is one of the herbs that can help increase nitric oxide, boost blood flow, and kind of enhance arousal. But it is not like Viagra. So you're not going to have a cup of tea and all of a sudden have an erection or have engorged tissues. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So here's the formula that I promised. So this is just the most basic of the formula. Meet David Bowie. I love him. He was the life of the party, which is why it's perfect. So we're using equal parts kava tincture, Aurelia berry, and Damiana. So let's say that we're doing, you're doing, 3 ounces. It will be 1 ounce of each. You're doing 6 ounces. It's 2 ounces of each. And if you want it to be more of an elixir and less of a tincture, you can do another part in honey. And if that's still too strong, you can do 2 parts in honey. And so you would adjust the dosage, right? And so the dosage is 2 to 4 milliliters, which is around, it's around 3.5 droppers, depending on your bottle size. And so if you add the honey, if you add 1 more part of honey, the dose would be 3 to 5. If you're adding 2 parts of honey, you'll adjust the dose up. And at 2 parts of honey, this is basically around a teaspoon, a little more than a teaspoon dose. And you're welcome to throw aromatics in if you like it, but the base is 1 part of each of these herbs to bring just think of it as an all-purpose herb of, formula of connection. I say because of the Aurelia berry, it's not for sleep necessarily. It's not that it's going to keep you up. It's just not going to make you inclined to sleep because you're just going to feel happy and good. Okay, we're still good. We might actually be done on time, which is very rare for Thomas or I. All right, so let's talk about rest and restoration, and we're going into sleep. So we started with connection in the life of the party, and then we're going to kind of arc down and talk about some herbs for rest and restoration. So we're thinking about rest as kind of an intentional pause from doing anything. Rest is the pause from doing anything. The quieting of the body and the mind so our systems can slow down, we can recalibrate and just kind of be. We're not producing, we're not doing, we're just being. So it's not necessarily zoning out in front of screens or collapsing from exhaustion. It's that space in between, right? And there is absolutely a place for scrolling and watching TV. I do it too. And that can absolutely be a part of rest. But we're thinking about rest as being something like taking a nap, sitting quietly with a cup of tea. If you're a meditating person, meditating. I'm not a meditating person. Or bringing mindfulness, gentle, not necessarily working out, but like gently stretching, taking a bath, things like that. Restoration is more of the process of refilling what's being depleted. So returning our nervous system and our emotions and our energy, back to a state of balance and capacity, for joy and resilience, which is really hard to do. Those of us that work 5 or 6 days a week, what are we supposed to, we're supposed to do everything we need to do on Sunday instead of restore, excuse me, and do all of the things that we're supposed to do to prepare us for the next week. So it can be really challenging to create space for restorative practices. In restorative practices, we are thinking about things like gentle movement, taking walks, but it's also what's restorative to one person is not necessarily restorative to another, right? That's where we get it's very unique. Like for me, going camping somewhere where there are no lights, I'm living in a city currently, but I used to live in the woods for a very long time. So for me, the most restorative thing that I can do let's take the dogs and go camping somewhere that's going to be really quiet and really dark. For someone else that's more stressed out by camping, that actually would be really stressful and not restorative at all. And I think of like restoration as well as being able to transition. So what I was talking about earlier with like day transitions. So transitioning from work or the state of doing into the state of being and using herbs, that's where herbs really shine in terms of rest and restoration. And we'll talk about sleep a little, like sleep specifically in just a minute. But rest and restoration, so marking transitions, whether they're rest or restorative transitions by using herbs. That cup of tea, that fun mocktail, that fun herbal cocktail, a syrup over ice cream, just something to bring kind of that restorative action in. Hi, Beatrice. So your notes are going to have the ratios for, you know, the alcohol to water ratios for epimedium and for Aurelia berry. So you'll have all the information to it isn't going to have like, there aren't going to be pictures to show you how to, you know, harvest those, but yeah, you'll absolutely get all the information you need for dosage and like how to make them from like commercial product or whatever you've grown. Okay. So practices that support rest and restoration and things that we, you know, part of our like transitions and our little ins for using herbs. We're thinking about sleep hygiene routines that honor our circadian rhythms, and using herbs to not necessarily just to go to sleep. They are really great for sleep, but also using herbs to transition from dinner time and whatever time and cleaning the house time into that, you know, 30 minutes to 1 hour before bedtime when we really can start to slow down. Our bodies naturally want to slow down for a while before we sleep, and it makes it easier and we're able to sleep more deeply that way. Restorative movement practices. Again, so those things like slow walks, tai chi, gentle yoga, or just stretching, you know, stretching. I know mobility, you know, there's like these, it's not yoga. It's like the nerve flossing and the gentle mobility. So ways that you're interestingly moving your body that kind of feel good, but they're not going to get your heart, you don't want to get your heart racing. That's restorative. And all the versions of mindful relaxation techniques, and also breathing. And herbs can be really, really lovely to help. Especially, I've always had a really hard time with the deep breathing. I do the like, you know, 4 in, pause for 4, and then do like 6 or 7 out. And herbs can be really helpful, especially like musculoskeletal relaxants. So something like lobelia or cramp bark or even ginger, something that's bringing warmth or relaxation to that abdomen so that we can take a deep breath and actually let it all out, which can be hard when we're anxious, or we're stressed out. Oh yeah, sighing. I think I naturally sigh. I don't know if I'm doing it tonight or not, but you know, I think a lot of folks that have a hard time breathing deeply are natural sighers. And it's another way our bodies are just like nudging us to be like, hey, get some more oxygen. You're gonna feel better if you get some more oxygen. Stop breathing so shallowly. All right, so let's talk about some herbs. So many herbs for rest and restoration. I just picked these ones because I think it's a good representation of like a little bit of a bunch of different kinds of herbs and different preparations that shine in different ways. I have 3 more slides after this, so I am going to go a few minutes over. If you have to go, thank you so much for coming. And Tiffany will get the full recording up, you know, tomorrow, by the end of the week at the latest. We'll get that. Sometimes we have like little tricksy things that happen, but you will have that along with the notes and those couple of handouts that I talked about. So skullcap tonic nervine. It needs to be tinctured fresh to get the tonic effects. Dried skullcap, whether that's a tea or a dried skullcap tincture. Also, people smoke it. That it's going to be more sedating. It's not going to be tonic in that way, but that does not mean that it doesn't work for rest and restoration. I use dried skullcap more for sleep and anxiety. So skullcap is indicated for when lights, noises, smells, when your senses are overwhelmed. So thinking about sensory hypersensitivity. When you just wish that there was a literal knob that you could turn everything sensory down. I feel like I see this. I have a lot of mama friends, and I feel like I see this. It's just like handing out buckets of skullcap to kind of turn that knob down in all of the senses, the screaming and the smells and the touching and everything. So completely hypersensitive to sensory issues. When people are kind of at the end of their ropes, emotionally kind of labile, a little bit reactive, whether that's angry or emotional, it's really good after recovering from drugs and alcohol, from stimulant overuse, like after someone has had kind of a mental break or has gotten too deep within emotions and had to take space for that. And even fresh skullcap tincture is sedating in high enough doses. And so, 1 to 3 milliliters a couple times a day. So 1 to 3, droppers a couple times a day is going to be tonic, and going up to a teaspoon. Once you get to that teaspoon dose, it is going to start being a little bit more sedating, but still tonic. Okay, what's next? What herb is next? Ashwagandha. Okay, so ashwagandha is a very balanced, like grounding and nourishing, nervine, and gentle, non-stimulating adaptogen that can be really helpful for anxiety, insomnia, exhaustion. We also use it in hypothyroidism, and there are some early studies that we should watch out for on potentially helping with low testosterone. So let's not all go out and start telling everyone that it works, but we can start to watch the studies. So those of you who read studies and see what happens in the next, 4 or 5 years. And if, I think that it was maybe just like 1 or 2 small studies that were finding some benefit. It improves the quality of sleep, especially it's especially helpful for staying asleep, right? And so we're thinking about it working to build resiliency over time. So it's working on that kind of stress, kind of our stress symptoms. So cortisol, and even though if it's not directly like you're not going to measure cortisol and then take a bunch of ashwagandha and necessarily see a shift just because of that ashwagandha, it's kind of downstream effects because of what it does to our bodies. I prefer to use it in a powder, electuary, or capsules. So the tincture is useful, it's relaxing, but if we want to get this tonic, if you want to get that tonic stress reduction or those sleep effects, you're going to need to take anywhere from 500 to 1500 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day. And so ashwagandha in Ayurvedic medicine was generally used powdered mixed with honey, oftentimes with other herbs. It was generally used in higher doses, and the whole root was taken into the body. And so the tincture, I just don't use it. Thomas doesn't use it. It doesn't mean that it's not calming, but it just doesn't work super well. We like it like as an electuary, so as a honey paste. The compounds aren't very water soluble, and it isn't the best tasting herb, so it doesn't work super well as a tea. Capsules work, and we also like it kind of decocted in your milk of choice. So you can use some of those like delicious aromatics. Maybe you're using an exhilarant like rose, but one of the ones that is more sedating and less stimulating if we're thinking about rest and restoration and potentially sleep as well. So we like it, and it's soluble in fats. So coconut milk, cow's milk, something that has a little fat in it. It doesn't work as well with soy milk or almond milk or those really low fat, that milk. So pick something that has a little more fat in it or put a little extra fat. I love it with maple syrup. I think it's nice with just a little bit of something sweet as well. Linden. So linden is a wonderful, lovely tea. In other parts of the world that aren't the US, it's often called lime flower. You can get it at grocery stores. I was able to get it. That's what it was called, lime flower in Thailand. And I know that a lot of parts of Europe, I'm not sure about, I know there were some folks from Australia and New Zealand interested to know what it is called in commerce there. But this is a gentle cooling and moistening nervine. It's really gently sedative, and especially good for softening the edges of rough emotions. So I'll use this if someone's just had like a really hellish day, like someone blew up on you or you blew up on someone and you just feel really raw and jagged. And so it's really good at softening those rough edges, those rough emotions. And I always tell people it's also really good to see the spaces between the leaves. And kind of what I mean by that is kind of that shift in focus. Because if you take the space and you let the linden work, your vision's going to widen. We're going to get that widening of perspective that happens when joy comes in. I think that linden although it's cooling, it's pretty darn close to an exhilarant in terms of its kind of action on, it might not be straight up, but I would say it's out in every direction is kind of the energy. So it's not moving down, it's not necessarily moving up, it's moving up, and sideways out of our body. So it's an expansive sort of herb. It can be helpful for sleep. It's not necessarily alone perfect for like folks that are having a ton of trouble sleeping, but it's absolutely lovely as part of a formula. It's also delicious. It's amazing as a hot tea, as an iced tea, a sun tea. I don't really make it as a tincture. It is effective as a tincture, but it's just so lovely. You can make a syrup with it as well, but because the flavor is so nice and it has that really nice moistening quality, I urge folks to try other preparations besides the tincture. Lime leaf, yeah. New Zealand is lime leaf as well. Linden is amazing for travel, and it helps you let go of the stress and frazzle that comes with flying. Oh yeah, absolutely. Nowhere are my edges after like spending a ton of time in airports. That's like almost all of us feel a little jagged, definitely. All right. Oh, so I didn't put, what I was going to do was take Hawthorn off. Hawthorn's amazing, but I really wanted to talk a little bit about mimosa, albizia. Oh, Jim is here. Oh, did someone let him in? So albizia mimosa was known as collectively as the collective happiness bark in Chinese medicine. That's one translation. So it's really great for depression that comes with grief, for kind of hardening of the heart, for a broken heart, and a lot of things. So mimosa is really uplifting. It isn't as kind of the bark isn't really as frenetic as the flowers, right? And so they're kind of different. I feel like that mimosa flowers have that really upward motion, and can be a little much for folks that already kind of have their head in the clouds, or maybe they're burned out. But the bark is really, really lovely, to kind of balance that energy while also giving that almost exhilarant effect we talked about earlier. We talked about Linden. We are getting close. Those of you I know, I said it again, but if you're leaving now because I'm going a little bit late, we have a couple more slides. And thank you for coming. So sleep. Sleep is one of the most direct ways to lower our stress load and to rebuild that capacity, not just for joy, but like resilience, like the capacity to be humans and do life. So sleep and joy, or sleep and kind of positive affect, that like general way that we're looking, like psychologically looking at positive emotion, like we said earlier, that runs both days. Having better days that have little or big moments of joy are going to help us sleep more, and better sleep builds more capacity. There's nothing like the mumbly grumps, that's what Thomas calls them, when with a 4-hour night of sleep. But it's so much easier to wake up and smile at the day when you've had 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, whatever your kind of target sleep is. So quality sleep, along with those kind of restorative practices, they don't just recharge us. They play a role in memory consolidation, refining those predictive models that we talked about, right? So if our brain is using predictive regulation to make the things that we experience on the regular more energy efficient, we're refining those predictive models while we're sleeping. And we're also sleep helps to maintain neuroplasticity. So that adaptive response to life's challenges, that's a huge part of resilience, is having that neuroplasticity, and sleep is a huge part of that. So herbs, because they add those reliable sensory cues, right? We taste something, we smell something, we feel something in our body, and those small and sometimes really big physiological shifts. We can use those, like we said, to mark transitions and to wind down. And we can do that on repeat, and that will really help with that predictive, Thomas likes to call it a predictive algorithm, with that kind of predictive model where our body knows what to expect. So even if you're not necessarily able, not everyone's able to go to bed at the same time, or they just don't want to. Sometimes something really cool is happening, or the moon is cool, or there's an owl outside, and I'm just like, well, I'm not going to bed because I want to sit here until the owl goes away, or whatever it is. Maybe we're working. But if our bodies know that cup of tea, that cup of linden passion flower tea is what comes before sleep, then we're more able to be adaptable even within, a shifting sleep window. Scents can work really well for that too. I love tea. I love to drink tea so much that I usually do tea, but you can make sure and smell something right before bed as well. And you're basically just training your body that the smell of rose essential oil equals sleep. Or maybe you don't pick something that's really common in your world because you don't want your brain being like, oh, cool, it's time to sleep. I take that back. I don't know that rose would be the best one because of that. This is a way to create capacity. So this is kind of our last slide. We're going to talk about some herbs for sleep. We already talked about lemon balm and how at higher doses it can be effective like part of a formula for sleep. But we can't talk about sleep herbs without talking about passion flower. Passion flower is kind of generally neutral in temperature and in moisture. And so it's a pretty good base, whether it's a tincture blend or a tea. It's really nice as a tea. It doesn't have a super strong flavor. It isn't too bitter. It isn't too floral. Even when you have the flowers in with your dyed passion flower, they still don't have a really strong, they're not like rose or lavender, or something that, has a lot stronger of a floral effect. So this is, classically for folks with circular thinking, that often creates insomnia. So we're thinking about the kind of, that monkey mind or that thought where so basically you say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to teach at 9 a.m. and then I have this and then I have that. Okay, and then I need to go grocery shopping, and you're writing your list down in your head, and then you start to ease off to sleep, and then bam, it just starts all over again, and you're in that wheel. So it's a wheel. It's really, really common to have those sort of same thoughts over and over again. Or maybe you're cycling through some of those, a set of thoughts. Also, I tell clients that have that to keep a notebook by the bed and write them down. So sometimes your brain will trust you that you'll get back to worrying about them in the morning. So maybe herbs along with kind of writing those things down can be a really helpful combination if you have trouble winding down because your thoughts are, running circles around you. Hops. So hops is one of my favorite herbs for sleep, with the caveat that it's very cooling and it's very bitter. And so folks that have a lot of like GI excess, it might not need that extra stimulation. That's why it's often used in formula. In teas, I use a very small amount. And in tincture blends, it's not going to be the only herb that I'm using. We're going to have one of those more neutral bases. But I think it's really great. It's really, really amazing for sleep when people are just constantly hot because of the coolness. I use it a lot. There's I think we shared, I don't remember, Tiffany, what we called it. You can share with people. It was like Mel's Hot and Grumpy. I don't know. It was something really silly. But we'll share that formula with you. But it was like hops and peach and passion flower and something else, like all of these cooling herbs. So we're thinking folks perimenopausal and into the menopause transition. So folks that are burning really hot, or they're like really hot at night and they're having night sweats and hot flashes, it can be really helpful as part of a program for that. And in kind of hot constitutions in general, it's very sedating. And people that like hoppy beer, like IPA type beers, generally really like having the vibe of hops in their body. If you have a very strong tincture, go easy. So like a standard tincture, like 1 to 2 droppers is as much as you need. Generally, if it's in a formula, if people are getting, maybe 1 ml or a little bit less as part of a formula. Is there any kind of caution around hops and estrogen? I'm not worried about hops and estrogen in the amounts that I use them for sleep. We already talked about lemon balm, so we're going to talk about that one again. I'm going to jump to lavender, and we'll come back to chamomile. I like to end with chamomile. Lavender, did we talk about, I don't remember if we talked about lavender earlier in the class. So lavender is amazing for anxiety. It also can help with that like anxious depression, right? And so it's been well studied. They're essential oil capsules to work and lift mood as well as like mild antidepressants. And it especially is really, really great. Performs almost as well as low dose benzodiazepines and the essential oil capsules. Right. And so we can use lavender in so many different ways, from essential oil capsules to a lovely, like kind of uplifting, part of a tea. It's really close to, I would consider lavender also an exhilarant in the sense that it's aromatic and it's slightly warming. It can be really lovely for certain types of headaches. And it's kind of specific for like high-strung nervous folks who really just need to relax. And because it has that mood-lifting ability along with its strong anti-anxiety. And so I like it for sleep, as a part of a sleep formula for folks that have a lot of anxiety. A higher dose of lavender is sedate. It is sedating. It is generally considered sedating. But it's not something that I would be giving for sleep alone, but absolutely, along with all of the other qualities that it has for uplifting, it's really great in those kind of syrups and glycerites that we were talking about to do mocktails or cocktails, to mark transitions in our days, from doing to being, doing to being, that it can be an amazing part of a sleep formula. I also really like it for grief that keeps folks awake. And I'm going to do some other things, some hawthorn, and I'm probably going to use passion flower along with that. But grief that is keeping folks awake, it can be really, really, really helpful. I also really like it with black cohosh for those dark and twisty. So like we're thinking like passion flower, lavender, a little bit of black cohosh, maybe a little bit of mistletoe if we have it, for those dark and twisties, right? So that nighttime existential dread that cough, like a lot of us are feeling, waking up in the middle of the night, like feeling filled with dread, feeling worried. This can be a part or two of lavender in a formula like that can be really fantastic. So we're going to end the night talking about chamomile. And the reason that I like to end the night talking about chamomile, especially in herbs for sleep, is because I think that we underestimate a good, strong cup of chamomile tea. It's nothing to mess with, right? And so I think that like the weak chamomile, that's been sitting at the back, like the Celestial Seasonings really weak chamomile that's been sitting on the shelf at your, local grocery store for 6 months. You might not get a ton. It might seem, you're still going to get some effect for it, but it might not seem very strong. But a good, strong, like 1 to 2 tablespoons per, maybe 1 tablespoon per, 8 ounces, steeped for 10 minutes. Cup of chamomile tea is absolutely an amazing adjunct for sleep. And I think Matthew Wood used to say, for fussy babies of any age. And so I also like to kind of add on that for its sleep uses. I'm not really using chamomile as a tincture for sleep. I think that a tea for sleep is really lovely. Unless you have issues with already waking up at night to pee, then absolutely try some of these herbs in a tincture so that you don't just pee a bunch more. We don't want to make you pee more than you're already peeing if you're already peeing too much. So fussy babies of any age. I'm also thinking about folks who are up, they need to make a decision, or there's something you have to do and you need to do that you don't want to do so bad that you would really like to throw an adult darn tantrum. So this is a good thing. I feel like oftentimes, if there's something I'm dreading in the morning, I'll have some trouble sleeping. And I legit just want to be like, I'm not doing it. Stamp my feet. And I think that chamomile is really amazing for sleep in that way. And honestly, if you make it a little bit less strong, in the evening before sleep, even if you don't want to have a tea right before bed, a couple hours before bed, if you're having that type of anxiety or that type of stress, then having a good strong cup of chamomile, medium strength cup of chamomile tea after dinner might shift you out of that place and allow you to sleep a little bit better. Can you try iced chamomile tea? Yeah, so what I would do, chamomile is empowering. I really think it is too. Um, I feel pretty strongly about that it can be a really empowering herb. And I think because we're adults, right? And we think about it as like a child's remedy or this like gentle remedy, remembering that there is a difference between gentle, gentle and weak. Gentle doesn't mean weak. Gentle is sometimes the thing that's the hardest to do and the thing that's the hardest to decide. And that can be really empowering. Can iced tea, chamomile tea work? Because hot tea gives headaches. So I would brew it hot, and then, yeah, let it cool. I think the chamomile tea cold tastes a little better with a little bit of sweetener. I tend to like a little honey in most, but not all, but most of my teas. But absolutely, you can take it as an iced tea. Actually, this summer, I think Tiffany can share the recipe or remind me to put it in the notes. But we shared kind of like a cold fizzy sleep drink. Like kind of like a nightcap sort of drink. So thinking about for folks that don't like hot drinks, or maybe it's 1,000 degrees outside and you really don't want a hot cup of tea, but you don't want to just let your tea cool down and then drink it, which is also nice. But if you want something more special, like absolutely making an iced tea blend for sleep. I think that there is some like relaxing nature to heat, but I absolutely think you're still going to get a lot out of these herbs if you make a tea out of them and then drink them iced. All right. So as we close and you're thinking about any last questions, just want to remind us that kind of working with herbs is not just about what the plant does. It's about how we bring them into our lives, and when we think about creating more capacity for joy and having those moments of joy in our daily lives, we can do that not just through taking tinctures or having a cup of tea, but creating those rituals, those moments of connection, those marking those transitions in our days and in our lives, the gardening, the medicine making, all of the things we talked about. Being creative with herbs means finding those forms kind of, and like any practices that feel good to you, that make you filled with joy, which is just a really fun way to say, let's all play with these ideas, right? Do that joy list we talked about and see how herbs fit in. Pop herbs into little 30-second moments of your day to bring little bits of joy, and do that sort of pendulation, and do that processing where you're kind of priming your body to feel certain ways at certain times of the day, if that's what you want. And then you'll start to be able to, because of predictive regulation, if you keep doing things regularly, even, a few seconds at a time, those small acts over time are going to open large pockets of joy or large space for us to widen our lenses and, remind our bodies that we can feel both joy and difficulty. Yeah, so I'm going to stop with the sharing and look at these questions. Oh, look, it's your faces. All right, let me look at, I got some 10 new. Thank you. You're so welcome, everyone. Looking forward to putting some of these into practice. Oh, that's excellent. Everything. If anyone has any questions and wants to stay back. Oh, Jim just got here well, actually, like 20 minutes ago now. Keep going. Yeah, so I followed along with most of the questions, but not all. So I'm happy to stay for a little bit and answer questions if anyone has questions. If not, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mel. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was going to include some black cohosh for the dark and twisties into a sleep formula, and I went to go and get the tincture, and the herbalist at the apothecary talked me out of it and suggested sunshine, which I also got. So I'm just wondering about the black cohosh.
So in my perspective is that dark and twisty doesn't always need to be banished. I think that like I think and at night it's a really natural time to feel dark and twisty, and also there's a lot of things to feel dark and twisty about right now. And so it's for me more than making it go away, it's about creating space to know that you can feel that and have the other things. Like that black cohosh mixed with those other herbs, I feel like allows me to have some space from that darkness, but it's not taking it away. I think that I would probably, if there's a lot of dark and twisty, I would lean towards sunshine during the day and allow some of that heaviness in at nighttime, because it actually can help you sleep deeply once you get a handle on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, thanks, Bob. Yay, senior class. Thanks, Bob. Hopefully I'll get down there this year and see y'all. Michael, question. Thoughts on herbs like mimosa causing a sort of spiritual bypass when someone experiences a loss in their life? So assuming the stages of grief have not all been experienced. So I don't know exactly what you mean by spiritual bypass. So are we saying like it's creating an experience of being uplifted that you feel like I don't think that taking mimosa, I mean, you can take a lot of mimosa for a long time, and it might take the edge off enough that you're not processing a little bit. But I generally think if you're taking herbs in moderate doses, and if you, because you need breaks from grief, right? I don't know that mimosa would cause like maybe, I don't know, I haven't thought about it, but in my head, no, that is not something that I would really worry about at normal dosage. Awesome, folks. That's great, Diane. I'm so glad that you like that. Thomas has more writing on that. I know there's some in the foundational program, but we also have a depression class that's like crazy. I think Cicely has been in and out of that class. It's like pretty detailed. That isn't available right now, but as soon as the Thomas does the last class, it will be available, as like a, buy as you go sort of class. Yeah. So the predictive algorithm stuff, it is really fascinating. I think it's kind of cool. It's like, although it's not the same exact thing as like Pavlov with the dogs, I mean, it like kind of, there's a lot more complicated things going on in our brains, and we can talk about them and the different types of predictive, but really, you can legit train yourself like you train your dogs to sit in some ways with some things. If you're also like supporting lifestyle, like I said with the priming, like take an herb at 7 o'clock every day that makes you sleepy, and eventually your brain's going to be like, cool, I'm sleepy now because it wants to, because of that. And that's a simple way to look at it, but because it can get more complicated, it doesn't mean that that simple idea isn't, effective. Yeah. Aurelia
Mel?
Nudicalis. Yeah. Am I still here?
Sorry. When I was visiting, one of the students gave me a frozen chocolate popsicle, and it was amazing, and I loved the recipe. And I don't know if, it was like an exhilarant, and it was really good. Do you know the one I'm talking about? It had kind of a rose flavor, I think, almost.
I don't, but I want it because I love chocolate and I love
Okay.
popsicles and I
Yeah,
love roses. I can put a
that's
blast out.
great. Okay.
I can put a blast out to see, because that was a while ago, right? Like when was that? Like 5 years, 4
Yeah.
years, 5 years? Yeah. We'll have to put a blast out to the graduates and see who did it. I bet it was okay, my brain's a little mushy. I'm picturing the face of the person, but not the name of the person. Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
oh, my battery's low, but it's plugged in. Anyway. Okay. So Aradia nudicalis, I have not used that herb. And so I can't really speak to it. Although I'm looking here, um, and it seems a little more like alternative diaphoretic than it is, but it does say that that it is lung stimulating. Um, but it looks to be let's see, I'm looking. I can't, honestly, I haven't used it enough to speak to it. If I can find information from someone that I trust that does use it, or if anyone that's still here uses it, happy to hear about that. If you have clinical, if you have clinical experience or use it directly, but I don't use it.
Great, thanks. But this is just a reminder, maybe I should just go try them out and be with them.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm
absolutely.
excited about the use of the berries. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Diane says, I think that's what people are doing with meditation routines, but I love the simplicity of talking about routines, the predictive algorithms, as a way to carve spaces that they need to feel better. Absolutely. Michael, for Mel, but also anyone, mentions of paradoxical effects of any of the herbs other than valerian in terms of mood and emotions experienced. I've clinically seen ashwagandha do that a handful of times, not a lot, but enough. My practice, I don't practice full time, of course, because I'm working for the school, but I regularly am seeing anywhere from 3 to 7 folks a week. So, a part-time practice. And I would say I see it maybe twice a year, but consistently seeing folks that get kind of stimulated from ashwagandha. And that's the most common one. I think that with mimosa flower, like I kind of mentioned earlier in the class, it's not that it's a paradoxical reaction. It's just for folks that are prone to mania or even really have really intense bipolar or just kind of are head in the clouds sort of folks. So their energy is already just always up here and not in their bodies. That mimosa flower can make them feel a little frenetic, like a little bit kind of spacey and irritated and uncomfortable. Or just even more their head in the clouds, but it's not a good thing. But I wouldn't say that's paradoxical. It's more just about people's temperaments. Absolutely. Sometimes black cohosh can make people feel depressed and gloomy. That's true. Thank you, Jim. Well, all right, folks. It was really amazing to be here for a couple hours and to talk to you about herbs and lots of things that weren't herbs as well. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. And if not, Tiffany will have the videos and I'll get the handouts and things that we talked about up in the classroom. And if I forget anything, which I don't think I will because we have a list going, but if I do, feel free, please. I want to know. Email me. I want you to get the things that we talked about and to get the full picture. And as a reminder, all the dosages and ratios for alcohol dilution will be in, and the contraindications for all the herbs we talked about will be in your handouts. Thanks, Jim. I will see you soon. And thank you so much, everybody. Handouts for the self-care class. I think they're in there, but I'll double check. I think we put them in the class. Oh, self-care class from the depression class. Those should be in there. That handout was done, but I'll double check to make sure that they made it there. They're not in there. Well, yeah, they're absolutely done. So Tiffany, remind me to get that to folks, please. Well, all right, everybody. My throat is in need of some demulcents, so I'm gonna go hit the demulcent bar. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed the free class series. If anyone has questions about our other programs, you can email me. We can get on the phone and have a chat. And I hope to see some of you or all of you in our free classes next month. Bye, everybody.